Hi everyone, this is easily my billionth attempt at recording. I've never really done a voiceover like this over such a long period of time over art. I mean, this was originally 6 hours worth of work that I somehow managed to cut down to 15. I don't know how I did that. Magic, I'm going to assume, but I finally also decided on a topic that I wanted to talk about. I started thinking about this, and then that, and then back to this, and then recording it, and then it wasn't working out, so this is where I ultimately ended up, and I wanted to discuss my time in a fine art college, rather than a specialized college for people who have an interest in illustration, storyboarding, things like that, like schools like SCAD, like RISD, and CalArts, stuff like that. And how I kind of made it work for me, and also how it didn't work for me. There was a lot of things that I wish I had, but a lot of things that I'm extremely thankful for, and those are the kind of things that I wanted to talk about. So, I ended up going to college when I was 19 years old. I took a year off from school just to kind of get my head together. I did actually initially apply to SCAD, and I did get accepted, but unfortunately I couldn't afford it. I mean, I feel like they kind of just accept anybody, as long as you can pay for it. I mean, that's not an insult to anybody, but it's just kind of oh, if you'll pay for it, you can come, why not? But yeah, I couldn't afford it, which is fine, I really appreciate the education that I got, and I'm super thankful for it, but, yeah, so I decided, and I looked at the colleges in my state, and I found one with a reasonably priced tuition, and I just decided to go for it, and that's where I landed. So, when I first got to school, I was settled on graphic design, and because that was the closest thing I could think of that made sense with illustration, since my skill set really lies in illustration and designing characters and conceptualizing things and creating character concepts and stories and those kind of things. That's where my interests are, and I didn't really find a place in that school where those interests fit in until the pathway of printmaking, or the emphasis of printmaking, was brought to my attention. So I actually never really thought I would be a printmaker. Period. Period. I never thought that's where I would end up in life. And, it just kind of happened. I remember expressing a lot of frustration about being sat in front of Illustrator, during one of my freshman classes, the foundation courses, which are basically just courses where you, go through different, emphasis areas and try things out and find your footing and, you spend I think it's, I don't know, however many weeks with one teacher or professor, then you go another couple weeks with the other professor, and it's a different area of art, and you practice on certain things like form and working with shop tools and creating sculptures, and you work with ceramics, but then you also paint, and you also do printmaking, and you also are on the computer a lot. So yeah, I initially started out on computers for the first time, with the first class, and I remember Illustrator just making my brain just melt. And maybe it's just Illustrator that made me make this choice, so Illustrator is why I'm a printmaker, let's be honest. And I remember getting so fed up, and my professor that was watching the class was the printmaking professor in the college, and I remember expressing this, that I'm sick of this, I don't like this, I don't like being in front of this computer without it making sense, I can't do what I want to do here, and I hate it. So he said, okay, and we never went back in the studio, or not studio, but the computer lab ever again. He took us into the printmaking studio, and we made prints. And from that moment on is where I really decided that I wanted to be a printmaker. I got to draw, which is what I really liked to do, and what I really wanted to do. And I got to work with my hands, and then didn't just click a button, and just kind of drag things around, and all these things I didn't understand at the time. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do, without really thinking about what that meant. So I like printmaking, don't get that wrong, but I don't love printmaking, and I think that's where my problem is. I'm good at printmaking too, especially silkscreen. I love silkscreen printing. I've done so much of it in undergrad, especially CMYK, but like I don't love it. It's just what I did in undergrad, and you know, like maybe it suits me because I'm a very technical person and I'm really all about precision and, you know, accuracy too, and like creating the cleanest and as many duplicates of my print as I possibly can and as clean as possible. And I really liked the troubleshooting about it, but it wasn't really what I wanted. There's this culture in printmaking that I don't feel like I fit into. I've just noticed a lot of like patterns in it, and like this isn't a jab at anybody who's a printmaker. I mean, like if that's your thing, and like I saw a lot of my peers thrive in that environment, but I really didn't. I didn't feel really very in tune with a lot of things, and like especially the more traditional printmaking methods, forget about it. Like I hated it. I hated it so much. I hated getting the ink on my hands because it's oil based. It's so yucky, and it's so hard to get rid of, and it's so unpredictable compared to like the more like the newer, quote-unquote newer processes of like silkscreen printing, where it's like water-based, it washes easy, it's fast, it's, you know, it's pretty streamlined compared to everything else, but that's like a whole other thing. But, you know, I really didn't fit into that culture, and I think that's where my first regret really came from. I just didn't feel like a part of it. I didn't like communicating with other printmakers because I didn't feel heard, and I don't know, I just feel like I made that decision a little too fast because further on down the line, I found out that I love fibers. And fibers is like weaving and stitching, like embroidery and like crocheting and all of these other things that I loved and I didn't know that I would love. I actually never really would have considered fibers as something that I would love until I had the opportunity to take a class, and it like instantly like fell in love with it, and that's the key word. I fell in love with it. If I had a sewing machine and I had access to a dye lab, I would be in that every single day. And I found that out too late. I found out that I loved fibers when I was like the second semester of my junior year. And it was just a little too late. It just made sense in my head. I was obsessed with the experimentation and like creating things, and I feel like I hooked to a lot of things pretty quickly. You know, but that's just not enough sometimes. And sometimes you figure things out too late, and I was tired. I was really, really tired in undergrad. And, you know, it happens. You just want to get out sometimes, because fibers is always going to be there. I just have to seek it out myself, you know? And I can still love both things, but, you know, this is like getting off track of like my experiences in art school and everything like that, mostly just getting into like emphasis areas and whatnot. But back on track, so like I said, I'm really into illustration, and the closest thing I could get at that school was illustration, or not illustration, but the closest thing I could get to in that school was printmaking. And I was able to create what I wanted for the most part. I was extremely fortunate to have a professor that supported everything that I did and was really supportive to my interests and everything, you know, without having me backed into a very traditional printmaking corner where, like, there's just a lot of activism in printmaking, and while I do care about activism, I'm not as like into it as printmakers are, just considering that the roots of printmaking tend to be very political, and I just didn't vibe with it at all. I just like to create things, and I don't like to always think too hard about things that I make all the time. So I just feel like because of that, I didn't necessarily fit in, and it kind of led me down this path of feeling like I didn't really belong there, and I had a lot of regrets, and actually ended up developing a lot of resentment for where I was. And I feel like that wasn't something I could necessarily avoid. But, you know, I think I learned a lot about myself, and I learned what it meant to stick to my guns. And I think that's something that I encourage everybody who is going to school for art, is going to school for something else than what they initially dreamed of doing. Like, if you're still going to get an art education that's not a specialized education, then make the most out of it and stick to your guns. Don't let people tell you like, oh, this is not as serious as this is, or like this is that and that's this and it just needs to be a certain way, because it doesn't need to be a certain way. It doesn't need to be a certain way. That's bullshit. It's part of my French, but that's really just a bunch of bullcrap. Like, you can do whatever you want. As long as there's intention and you can validate it, which you almost always can. If you care about it, you can validate it. And there you go. If you give a shit about it, you're in. And that's that. And that also leads me into a conversation about, like, when is art serious and when is art not serious? And I feel like art can be serious if you give a shit about it. If you give a shit about your work and you give a shit about what you're making, it's good. And that's that. I don't give a shit if you're just drawing Sailor Moon all day. And that's something that people in art school love to rip on. They love it. They live for shitting on anime, and especially Sailor Moon. They live for it. They take every chance they can get to rip on it. And you know what, girl? If that's your thing, do it. I just, like, why are you letting this happen to you? Like, why are you letting it get to you? If you care about it, it's valid. And if you can make good work about what you love, even if it is Sailor Moon or whatever they like to be angry about, good. If the work is good, then it's enough. And, and that not like Sailor Moon can be a placement for everything, like a it's a placeholder for anything. Like, it could be furries. I have had so many furry classmates, and their work was awesome. It was so cool to see people do what they wanted and make it happen in all different kinds of art. It's amazing. And I really, really, really applaud these people for sticking to their damn guns. Like, make what you want, love what you make, and it's good enough. Because honestly, as soon as they hand you that degree and it's in your hand and you graduated successfully, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because you're the critic now. Like, and there's the world that's the critic or whatever. But if you love your work and you have a feeling that somebody out there is not going to love your work because it's not what everybody else is doing, I've got some news for you. And it is that somebody will love it. They just haven't seen it yet. You can make whatever you want. If you're happy and you care about it, it's good. You're fine. Don't worry about being this serious artist who sells work to galleries and is in the MoMA. Don't. Just, like, make what you want to make and love what you make, and it will be worth it. Because trust me, when you make work that you don't love to fit into a culture that doesn't speak to you, the work dies. The love in it is gone. And that is the hardest thing to regain in art making. Like, I will sit here and I will paint hundreds and hundreds of pretty anime girls just because it's what I love and what makes me happy. And it makes me feel like my effort was worth it. And I can look at these drawings all day and have joy sparked in me. And, all those boring ass prints that I made to appease whoever are the ugliest damn things I've ever seen, and I am so happy that they're in the trash, because it wasn't my art. It was art that I made to try to fit in, and maybe it worked, but it wasn't worth my time, and that was a lot of time into prints. If you're a printmaker, you know what I'm talking about. It's a lot of time, a lot of preparation, for what? And I think that applies to everything, Maybe I'm getting off track here, I'm not really sure, but bottom line is that don't worry. No, not even bottom line. There's just like 3 steps here, okay? There's 3 rules. If you love it, it's good. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks, and just make it worth your time. Make it worth your time, make it worth your supplies, make it worth all of that energy. And to make it worth all of that, you have to give a fuck about it. If you don't, then what's the point? What is the point? You go through school and you think about all these things, and you think about all these things that they tell you, and like job, and like, yeah, like, we need to make money. We're going to school, we're getting these degrees to become trained in something to make money. But like, like I said, if you love it, somebody will love it. They just haven't seen it yet. You know, I'm kind of hitting like the mark here on time, but all I'm trying to say is if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna go to school, and it's not what you initially thought about doing, if you still want to go, and you end up in an emphasis that isn't quite what you wanted, make the most out of it, and don't transform yourself. Transforming yourself is only gonna make it a much more miserable experience, and you don't want to make it miserable. You don't want to change yourself for something that eventually is not going to matter. And it's just not worth it, because if you love it and you can validate it and that's it, good. You did it. You created work that's serious and is worth time. So I think that's all I actually have to say on this. I didn't expect to speak for so long, but you know, I think I kind of hit the nail on the head with what I was trying to go for here. It's kind of messy, but I actually ended up covering 2 topics that I wanted to cover. So yeah, I will get started on another piece and then come back again with another hard-hitting topic, I guess, and we'll just have to see. So thank you for listening to me talk and get kind of heated. But yeah, thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.